Well, you talk a lot about the apparitions of our Blessed Mother, particularly at Fatima and the message of Fatima.
Right.
And that's become a real centerpiece of a lot of what you love to talk about, that you've had a real impact in your own life as a result of the message of Fatima. Maybe you could speak to that, how that came to take hold of you, and why you've decided that it's a really important thing for you to share in the way in which you've shared it so well.
Yeah, I was probably, I'll go back and simply say this. I say this all the time when I speak publicly. I don't have a great conversion story. I am like the majority of Catholics out there, I think. Born and raised Catholic, go to Mass. Why? Because you're supposed to. Okay, some people leave the church. I never did. I've probably missed Sunday Mass in my life 7 or 8 times, and it's only because I was sick, couldn't get to Mass. But I was a clock in, clock out Catholic, I call it. Put your hand in the holy water font, clock in, walk out after Mass, clock out, And that was the extent of my faith, really, very mediocre. And my aunt, God rest her soul, beautiful woman, told me about Marion Apparitions. She mentioned this to me. And, the long and short of it is I was blown away by the idea that the Blessed Mother would appear, and blown away even more so that she would bring messages that would involve the word chastisement. And so I'd heard about alleged messages somewhere happening in the world, and it was Medjugorje. And so I went to her and I said, what's going on, this whole thing? And she said, well, it's not approved, so be cautious. I said, what do you mean approved? Well, the church has to vet and thoroughly check. Okay, well, has this happened before? Yeah. Where? What should I? Fatima. I've heard of Fatima. My mom gave me a little prayer book on it. I stuck it in that little drawer that we hide all of our prayer stuff in when our parents and grandparents give it to us. We don't want to throw it away, right? You put it in a drawer, keep your scapulars, your rosaries. Thanks, Grandma. I can't throw it away, but I'll put it in the drawer. So I went home to that drawer, opened it up, pulled out that little prayer book, just a small little thing, and I started reading through it, and I read through the story, the 6 apparitions. I got to the 3rd one, July 13th, where she showed them the vision of hell, talked about Russia spreading the error of her ways, and talked about a Second World War that would come. And when I read that, a number of things hit me. One, I put the book down actually and walked away from it. I walked across my bedroom and turned around and looked at it from across the room and thought, I can't read this anymore, because I knew, because my life had been so mediocre, I was not in the right place. I wasn't a big party animal doing things like that, but that didn't matter. I still wasn't on fire for anything. I didn't have any conviction. When I say on fire, I don't mean you're out there preaching it full of zeal. That's one way of being on fire. But then you've got all those people that are on fire, that are dedicated and committed. They pray that rosary, they go to Mass, they go to adoration. They might not have that exuberant attitude, but they're on fire inside. It's in there. I didn't have any of that. I finally go back, pick up the book, keep reading it. What I really got from the whole story of Fatima at that age of my life was, this is a practical, cut and dry scenario here. If man doesn't stop offending God, there'll be a Second World War. 21 years or so later, 1938, everything begins. It happened. Everything she said would happen to happen. And it happened, in that very short amount of time. And to me, I started putting 2 and 2 together. Well, look how we were back then to look how we are now. Look at what was going on in the world back then morally compared to what's going on now. There's always been sin, but we're on a different level now. We're on steroids. We can put stuff out there on social media instantly, and 5-year-olds will get it on the other side of the planet. And it can be the darkest, most horrendous stuff out there. So when people say, well, we've always had sin, it's always been like this. And we've always had sin, but we have not had the means to transport, to share, to proliferate sin like we have now. And the gravity of the reality, I should say, not gravity, but the reality that we can share this message everywhere through even means like we have right now with this podcast. We can get this word out. And people are choosing one thing over the other more. And that's a dangerous thing. So when I was looking at all this, to me, on paper, you don't got to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. She came, said this to 3 little kids. These kids are basically illiterate peasant children, right? You don't have to have a degree in theology, right, to understand when the Blessed Mother comes to 3 little kids and says, you've got to stop doing this, or God's going to do this. He's going to allow this Second World War. This is a very serious moment. I put those pieces together and just thought to myself, well, this is never going to be the same for me now, ever. She brought a message to me, to my heart, that was so clear and so direct. You've got to do something about this, Doug. So I really have told myself for years now, I really don't like any public speaking that I do that does not include her, especially Fatima. But the Rosary, the Blessed Mother, something. Partly because I want to stand before God, and even if it doesn't go well for me, and our Lord might be saying, this and that. I'm hoping she's over there to the side saying, son, he did talk about the rosary a lot. It's okay, Mom. All right, let him in. That's what I'm hoping for. We've got to promote devotion to Mary.
Right.